Hey there, I'm Frank. In this video, we're going to talk about Boyfriend Dungeon, which is an oddly, or should I say, aptly kinky title. Developed by Kit Fox Games, Boyfriend Dungeon is a roguelike game that mixes fast-paced action with intimate dating sim mechanics. Despite how silly that sounds, the whole concept is executed quite well, and the story does tackle some serious themes, including but not limited to stalking, abuse, and depression. Well, that got dark. The game does warn you at the start though, and it actually handles these topics pretty well, so you'll be fine. The basic premise of the story is that you're spending the summer over at Verona Beach. There, you immediately learn about a new fitness trend where you get to meet new people and kill stuff for money. You also learn that some people here have the uncanny ability to turn into weapons, while regular people like yourself are called wielders because, well, that's all you can do. You can wield weapons. At the start of the game, your cousin introduces you to your first weapon friend, Isaac. He can transform into a sword, and when you first meet him, you shake his hand by holding his hilt. This is where we get introduced to the action-oriented half of the game. The controls are pretty simple. You have light and heavy attacks that can be chained into combos, you can dodge incoming attacks, and you have a variety of passive abilities that are unique to each weapon. It kinda reminds me of Hades, which is a game that I reviewed on my blog, frankgamer.com by the way. While you're in a dungeon, or dunge for short, the monsters you face are actually physical manifestations of your fears and insecurities. In the player's case, one of the first enemies you encounter in the game are flip phones. Maybe it has something to do with the fear of change because, old tech and stuff. Or maybe something about connecting with others. Or maybe it's the irrational fear of phone calls that I have due to my introversion. Oh my god! While the many weapons and randomly generated levels do add a bit of variety to the game, I personally think that none of the unique skill trees and combos really make that much of a difference if you're good at timing your attacks and dodges. Basically, the combat's fine, there's nothing wrong with it, it's just that the lack of more advanced enemies make it feel like you're essentially fighting the same stuff with a different skin in every level. It actually gets ridiculous later on because once you've leveled up high enough, you can pretty much just steamroll through everything, including the bosses. The game makes up for these shortcomings with its stellar writing and careful handling of rather sensitive topics. As you progress through the main story and go on dates with each of the characters, you'll find that many of the game's story beats touch on some pretty heavy shit, showing a level of seriousness that you probably wouldn't have expected from a game called Boyfriend Dungeon. Now, I can't really go into too much detail without just spoiling the entire game, but let's just say that the other half of the game, which is focused on meeting new people, exploring the concept of polyamory, and learning about the many flaws that each character has, is actually tastefully done and nothing really feels too forced. Except for the fact that the protagonist essentially goes from zero to hero really early on. But hey, it's a game about killing monsters and, potentially having both platonic and romantic relationships with an arsenal of weapons, so I think we can give that a pass. The game's main antagonist, Eric, has been a rather controversial subject. Really, it's gotten to the point where people are actually going after the voice actor because of his character. It's a bit of a Joffrey Baratheon situation, and yeah, yikes. Eric is a manipulative stalker who you'll constantly bump into throughout the game, even if you brush off his advances and tell him to fuck off. While it's unfortunate that you're pretty much forced to interact with him every now and then, a major aspect of the story is about dealing with the unfortunate reality that people like him do exist in real life. Side note, but as I was playing the game, I kept receiving this in my spam folder. Seriously, Eric just never gives up. Jokes aside, the story is something that you can come back to, as you can approach certain characters in slightly different ways. Plus, you can only really fully pursue a romantic relationship with only one character per playthrough. The roguelike half of the game, however, does feel a bit incomplete, and long before you even reach the final boss, which does end the game by the way, you'd have already seen everything it has to offer in the action side of things. I guess that's really the only problem that I have with the game, because it could have worked just as well, if not better, without the hack and slash gameplay, at least in its current form. I feel like the main problem here is that the game only features two different dungeons, and as I've mentioned earlier, there's a distinct lack of variety in the types of enemies that you'll be facing. The only reason to even keep coming back to these dungeons is to max out your affection level with each of your companions. And the only reason I even wanted to do so was because the game features a diverse cast of compelling characters, ranging from an elusive artist who can turn into a dagger to a K-pop idol who can turn into a laser saber. How does that even work? If he's in his weapon form and he's awake, does that mean he's always turned on? I feel like Boyfriend Dungeon could have benefited from one or two more dungeons, maybe with some slightly harder enemies just to spice things up a bit. Luckily, at the time of this recording, Kit Fox Games are currently working on DLC for the game, which features 2 new characters and at least 1 new dungeon. So maybe some of the issues that I have with the game will be addressed in the near future. Overall, the whole experience is pretty enjoyable if you can look past the overly repetitive nature of the actual dungeon gameplay. The more visual novelesque portions of the game are really well done, and if you're into that kind of thing, you're absolutely gonna love this game. It probably helps that the cast isn't just a checklist of stereotypes that you would typically find in games like this, and the whole concept of people turning into weapons, as silly as it is integrated well enough into the world that it doesn't feel like a massive joke, especially with how the weapon forms of every character that you meet are just direct reflections of their origins and or personalities. I do hope that they expand on this universe a lot more with the upcoming DLC, because the game itself is pretty short. You can finish one playthrough in a single day if you have enough spare time, unless you're going for 100% completion, which I totally did. Cause why the hell not? Now before I end this review, there's one thing that I forgot to talk about. The soundtrack. It's fucking good. Like, right off the bat, the music in the main menu was already pretty fucking good.
Hunting, I'm on the lookout for something. I'm lonesome, but I feel alive.
That's really all I have to say about Boyfriend Dungeon. I look forward to whatever the upcoming DLC will contain, and if it's long enough, I may revisit the game in a future video. For now though, it's time for our arbitrary number rating. I give this game 6.9 daggers out of 7. Unfortunately, one of them got chipped, and you'll just have to beat the game to get it fixed. That's a bit of an out of context spoiler for you. Anyway, catch you guys later. The basic premise of the story is that you're spending the summer over at Verona Beach. There, you immediately learn about a new fitness trend where you get to kill people. Kill people? No, that's wrong. There's a new fitness trend. It's called murder. God damn it.